I have to laugh at myself. I laugh at myself all the time. This is one of the ways I learn, too, is by being able to take delight in my own past errors. Everything's a victory for me. But I have to laugh at myself because Sunday, Easter Sunday, I'm making this on Good Friday, so 2 days from today is when you'll see this movie most likely, or sometime thereafter. But Easter 2015 is the 3rd anniversary of the publication of Man Alive. Yay for me. Yay for Man Alive. One may hope yay for you, and ultimately yay for the world. But that book was released to the world for free, still available for free, at selfadoration.com. Was released on April 8th, 2012. Serendipitous, that was Easter Sunday, and serendipitously, this coming Sunday, April 5th, 2015. Is that right? And April 5th, 2015 is Easter Sunday. So not quite exactly 3 years, but almost 3 years less 3 days. The birthday, 3rd birthday of Man Alive. I should buy a cupcake. But I have to laugh at myself. Because when I published that book, very soon thereafter, I projected that, given the scalability of the internet, we ought to be able to completely revolutionize the entire world in, say, 500 days. 500 days. It's about a year and a half. It seemed completely reasonable to me. I mean, philosophical revolutions typically take around 500 years, and I live on a 500-year plan. I'm sure I've talked about this before. It's been a part of my intellectual praxis since I knew the words intellectual praxis. I've always thought in the very long term, the very long range, and I'm undismayed if the kind of ideas that I'm talking about take 500 years to take root. But really, practically speaking, in the age of the internet, we should be able to collapse that kind of a 500-year process down to 500 months and 500 weeks. Why not 500 days? So I thought 500 days would be sufficient. It turns out that hasn't been the case, not so far. But I laugh anyway because I wrote Man Alive when I did, basically in the last third of my life, or the last projectable third of my life, assuming a 75-year lifespan. I wrote it in the last third of my life because I wanted to delay the pain, delay the punishment. Not the punishment from writing the book, but the punishment from publishing it. How daft am I? How exuberantly irrational am I that I thought that I had to keep this stuff quiet to avoid being persecuted for it. And I was wrong. I was in error. I was mistaken. It's really funny to me. And it's symptomatic of the kind of magical thinking that infests the subjunctive in any case. I understood the ideas that I elucidated in Man Alive. I understood most of them in a very comprehensive way in 1988 when I wrote Johnny with a Point. I was a much younger man, barely into the second third of my reasonable lifespan. And of course that book elicited almost no attention. The one big offshoot from the book was that a woman that I married soon after I published Johnny with a Point, subsequently used it in our divorce, used it against me allegedly as some great and grievous weapon. It was of interest only to her, but it was of interest to me in the sense that it's a book that basically says if you betray this book, it will kill you. And I don't know that it's actually killed her. I don't mean that literally, but you can't dance with me very long without acquiring my kind of ideas about intellectual integrity, and those ideas will haunt you forever if you betray them. This is in the way of a disclaimer, I suppose. I don't think I've ever actually disclosed this, but it does amount to a useful disclaimer that if you want to listen to what I have to say, I deeply encourage, I truly, deeply earnestly, sincerely encourage you to listen to what I have to say. But if you don't intend to follow through on it, you're probably better off not listening, because I intend to get in your head forever and stay there. And that was already there in Johnny with a Point. And so I thought, at the time that I wrote Johnny with a Point, I thought I was in for the howling gales of self-justifying outrage, the sort of thing we're seeing right now in Indiana, or with respect to Indiana. If you're cognizant of the news at April 5th, 2015, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're not, it does not matter, because whatever is the howling outrage of the moment is an equally valid and useful cipher, because it's the howling and breastfeeding, the tearing up and renting of flesh and all of that. That's what matters, not the object of the outrage, but the outrage itself. It's the display that matters. None of that matters, though. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at my own fundamental ridiculousness for presuming first that Johnny with a Point was going to light the conflagration that would change the world, and then my later supposition that Man Alive would do the same thing, only more, bigger. And it has been read by a lot of people, which is, I'm very grateful for that. It's been read by thousands of people, many of whom I've heard from, some of whom I hear from on an ongoing basis, and some of whom I know are raising their children with ideas that they have worked out from reading me. And that's really cool, because this is my invitation to the world beyond the grave. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in an afterlife, but I believe that ideas can live on long after the people who came up with them have died. And one of my goals in writing Man Alive in particular was to leave a lasting book, a book that would endure. It's written, it says so in several different places, but it's probably not obvious to you. It's written on the presumption that it may be being read, the person reading it may be reading it after a huge civilizational event. It's common to call it a collapse or whatever, but I really don't know what might happen. But it is plausible to me that in the same respect that what was left of Roman civilization managed to collapse more or less all at once and into the Dark Ages, those sorts of events have happened in other high civilizations in the past, and it seemed plausible to me when I was writing the book, and it seems plausible to me now that we could be on the cusp of something like that. And I don't know how soon, 50 days, 50 weeks, 50 months, 50 years, 6 to 1 you pick them, 6 to 5 you pick them. But it was plausible to me that someone could be reading that book after that kind of a drastic, radical change in civil life, social circumstances, the political reality that people might be living in. Might be living in a concentration camp, and that's why the book is so short. It's 32,000 words. I wish I could make it shorter. I've worked ever since I finished that book. I've worked at writing my book shorter and shorter and shorter, because I know I'm dealing with people who have less and less time available to read and less interest in reading, and need the information to be presented in a denser and more useful way. I'm deeply in tune with that. It's kind of the way I read. And why would I expect people to be that radically different from me? Well, they really are radically different from me, but not in that respect. But it's all just so funny to me, that my expectation that my results would be so much more massively magnified than they have been so far. Important words, so far. Because I have great hopes for this style of thinking going forward, and it is... the more I look at the world and the more I discuss it, the more I talk about it week after week here at the Church of Splendor, the more aware I am that the point of view that I'm offering is radically different than anything that has been presented before. That you could say, this is similar to that and that is similar to this, and I will concede it happily so. Some things I owe to other people, and other things I owe to understanding what other people got wrong, and still other things I owe to the fact that I look at the world differently from almost everyone. Not just almost everyone now, but almost everyone ever. The people that we know about. I may be the oddest duckling in the hatchery. But I have huge hopes for the propagation of my ideas for the future, simply because they're better. My ideas are better, and I know they are, and you know they are, and that's why you're here. That's why you're listening. So this is all really just kind of me celebrating the anniversary of Man Alive, celebrating the growth of my philosophy, small though it may have been. A seed, when it starts, from the time it's a seed till it doubles in size, is a long time, and doubling again is a long time, but every time it doubles it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If people are raising their children to be rational egoists in the way that I describe it, then those children will conquer the world in due course. Their children and their children, their grandchildren. Send forth an army of children who understand that the universe that matters emerges from the inside out, that the world you're looking for, the world you find is the world you're looking for, and the world that you want to find is the world that you will make from the inside out. Give me children who understand that and who think that way, and my ideas, my kind of ideas, will conquer the world because they're better. So, in celebration of all this, call it the 3rd anniversary of Man Alive, call it the 1st anniversary of the Church of Splendor. I will give you the 5 rules so far, the 5 rules of the Church of Splendor. I have no idea how many rules I'll end up with, and there are always some that I'm considering that may or may not make the list, but I added rule number 5 this week, and so I figured I should probably list the rules so you know what you're up against. Rule number 1, I don't go to your church. Rule number 2, I am not arguing with you. Rule number 3, don't be an asshole. It's reflexive, it refers to me. Rule number 4, butthurt is not contagious. Generally speaking, not reflexive, it refers to you. Rule number 5, never play the other man's game. So these are all rules really for me. I mean, you can follow them, and I really think you should, but they're really rules for avoiding error in your introspective thinking and also in your social interactions with other people, in debate, how to avoid engaging in erroneous, egregious, fallacious, or obnoxious behavior simply because you're having a disagreement with someone. That I think it pays massive dividends to remember that other people can want things different from what you want and not be wrong or evil or vile or venal or subject to your punishment. Other people don't deserve to be punished simply for disagreeing with you. I have to remind myself of this because it's easy for me to say things that I would rather I hadn't said. That's what all of these rules are about, is how to make sure that your management of your own intellectual life is admirable and appropriate, rational. These are not splendor seeking so much as they are squalor avoiding. This is the extent that you will find the cautious impulse in me is a list of don'ts. So, taking them the long way, I don't go to your church. That simply means that the arguments that I'm making are mine, that whatever arguments you might make, whether they originate with you or someone else, are yours to make. I'm not responsible for any cognitive dissonance that you might suffer in listening to me and comparing what I say to what you say, and I don't have to take responsibility for any dogma other than my own. I don't go to your church. I am not arguing with you, and generally speaking, I am not arguing. If you have a specific question for me, I'm happy to answer it. I will answer any question on any topic. But if you want to pick a fight, in other words, if you're looking for me to have an argument with you, I'm not having an argument with you. If you want to clarify something that I say, or if you want to point out something that I've said that is erroneous, if you want to help me understand something better, if you and I can engage in a colloquy that results in greater mutual understanding, all of that is wonderful, but I am not engaged in verbal pugilism for its own sake. Too much of the internet is. I am not arguing with you. Hence, don't be an asshole. As I said, it's reflexive. It refers to me. I don't intend to engage in obnoxious behavior. If I do, I expect to be called on it, and I really don't want to. I don't want to see myself that way. I want to choose admirably all the time. And therefore, I want to admire my conduct at all times, including when I'm dealing with someone who, for whatever reason, seems to me to be behaving disagreeably. I don't intend to be an asshole. And I really don't have to. I don't have to anyway. Obviously, you don't have to do any of this, but I don't need to or want to. And there is no benefit, obviously, for me from doing that. But the important thing to understand is that butthurt is not contagious. That whatever injury it is that you happen to be suffering through, whatever unmet need has you feeling disjoint, whatever it is that you think I should be weeping about, I'm not weeping about it. Your butthurt is not my problem. Butthurt is not contagious. If you want my help trying to figure out what it is you're going through and how to come up with a better strategy for dealing with it, ask the question. But if you intend to push your butthurt on my desk, guess what? My desk ain't built that way. Butthurt is not contagious. And then rule number 5 is the one that I added this week. Never play the other man's game. This is a story from Mike Royko, columnist for the old Chicago Daily News. He's long since deceased. Wonderful writer. I give Ramblin' Gamblin' Willie to everybody, but if you take John Prine and Mike Royko, you've pretty got 90% of everything that goes into a Ramblin' Gamblin' Willie story, those two writers. But I grew up reading Mike Royko and really loved him. There was a column that he wrote about his son. His son had just gotten his PhD in something or another and went to New Orleans with his friends to celebrate the awarding of their degrees. And they were walking through the French Quarter when a hustler steps up to them and says to Royko's son, I will bet you $10 that I can tell you where you got those shoes. And not only that, I'll bet you $10 more that I can tell you what street you got those shoes on. Royko's kid thinks, I'm from Chicago. I'm in New Orleans. There's no way he's going to win these bets. And so out comes the $20. And the hustler says, not only am I going to win this bet, both halves, but I'm going to teach you a valuable lesson. So first, where you got those shoes is on your feet. And the street you got those shoes on is Bourbon Street. And the valuable lesson I have to teach you is never play the other man's game. And I like that. I just like that expression, never play the other man's game, because it is so much a part of the way that I approach everything. I talked about this last week. I know I've talked about it before, that I set up every alternative in my life so that either outcome is a victory for me. Either outcome is pleasing to me. That one may be more preferable, one less so, but neither is something that I don't want. I don't do things I don't want to do. I'm not involved in things that I'm not interested in doing. I don't act against my interests. And that's what it means when you're doing something that you don't want to do. You're acting against your own perceived self-interest. Your own idea of what your interests are is not being served because you're too busy doing something that you would rather didn't do. I don't do those things. So every alternative in my life I set up in such a way that I'm happy with either outcome. And therefore I always win. And that's my way of understanding the idea of never play the other man's game, is to never let other people put you in a circumstance where you're doing something you don't want to do, or where you may end up having to do something you don't want to do. You may end up having made a choice that you deeply regret and wish you could revisit, and will undoubtedly cascade into other mistakes and poor choices simply as a result of your having started the process by doing what you shouldn't do. So my vote is never play the other man's game. Only live by your own standards, for your own values. Only look out for your own. Only pursue your own values, your own splendor. And we'll we'll start the 4th year of doing that right here next Sunday. Bless you. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I will talk to you soon.